Welcome back to another episode of the Return of the Roar Sacramento Kings podcast on Sactown Sports 1140. My name is Brenden Nunes. Got my guy Frankie Cartoscelli here with me after the Kings' first preseason game, recording the day after. How you doing, Frank?
I'm good, Brenden. I'm doing great. Last night, real good to be around everybody. Kind of felt like we've said first day of school vibes a lot. I think a lot of people probably felt that way, not just media, but fans too, kind of being back there. And nice to be surrounded by all of our kind media friends while I stressed out the Yankee game before things got underway. And then an interesting vibe last night, man. It was kind of, our eye test when we're at Golden One, when we're looking at, sections like 220 or 221, I think, the upper level, we can kind of tell if that area is kind of filling out by pregame warmups. Is going to be a big night. Sellout crowd last night for a preseason game, which probably for a lot of reasons, the Stephen Curry aspect, the Warriors aspect of it all, but just the fact that Kings basketball is back, it felt like a regular season, or dare I even say like the play-in type of vibe at the beginning. Is that crazy to say that it was that kind of vibe, because it felt that way?
No, there was good energy in the stadium. I think, like you mentioned, it being the Warriors definitely factored in. Like Curry got a decent ovation when they announced him in the lineup. But it makes for a fun environment. Like we saw it in the postseason, even a couple years ago, where that sort of back and forth in the same building, I think, is fun. It was the Warriors' first preseason game in California, for what it's worth. So that probably factors in a bit. But I hadn't realized it was sold out until you mentioned that. Yeah, it says it on this sheet here as well. But I think the clear highlight from Sacramento's side is this DeMar DeRozan's first time putting on a Kings uniform and actually getting to suit up in front of the Golden One crowd. And he did not disappoint offensively. Starters only played the first half, which is very typical for a preseason game. And DeMar DeRozan, in 15 minutes in that first half, 15 points on 6 of 6 from the field, which included 1 3. He made both his free throws. He's a Sacramento King now, but he made both his free throws with 1 assist in there as well. Apparently, he got a block too. I don't quite remember that one. But everybody said on the team, coaching staff, his teammates, DeMar himself, that they thought this was going to be a pretty seamless fit offensively, that Chicago ran similar things. It's a read and react offense. He's a smart player. Domas can just set the dribble hand off the screens a little bit lower. If you go under, that's a free mid-range for DeMar DeRozan. And it all seemed actualized last night. 15 points on a perfect 6 of 6 from the field.
And I think like the spacing issues that we've been hearing about for a long time really, again, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves here. This is 15 minutes of time here seeing the floor, but it just seemed like with the amount of screening and the movement, like we usually see in a Kings offense, 15 assists, by the way, from the starting group in the first half. I mean, that's right where you want to be. I mean, I think the Kings had I had to pull it up. I think last year I pulled it out. It was like a 24 and like 6 or something crazy, maybe a bigger record than that. But the point is, they had a very high winning percentage when they passed out 30 or more assists. That's on pace to hit that mark. Just seeing kind of that movement with De'Aaron Fox, who was setting a lot of off ball screens and kind of helping some guys get open on that movement. DeRozan was a seamless fit. I mean, also he's a guy that averaged 5 assists per game last year. So not just the fact that he's able to get his own offense, but he's going to find others too. Last night obviously didn't really work out. I mean, I think he had 1 assist, but seeing Sabonis and him kind of already kind of have that chemistry with that 2-man game and the dribble handoffs. The first basket he made was a patented DeRozan mid-range off of DHO. That's going to be fun to watch. So it was very cool to see, first and foremost, DeRozan in a Kings uniform, which I think a lot of fans there, like you mentioned, the price of admission for a lot of Kings fans was to see DeMar DeRozan in a Kings uniform. But to see him go 6 of 6 in 15 minutes, I mean, it has to make you feel a little confident in this offense. And when you factor in how Malik Monk played off the bench last night, seeing how he can continue to be that microwave 13 points in 10 minutes before he had to leave for personal reasons. Side note, it sounds like that's a non-story, or there's nothing really to that. Mike expected Malik to be at practice today, so we'll see about that later. But
yeah, I heard about it a little bit too. It sounds like it's really nothing.
No big deal.
It's a preseason game and not really a big deal.
But that raised eyebrows, obviously, when you see anyone leave or exit. But the point is, seeing the amount of weapons the Kings have last night and seeing what everyone can do down the floor, 1 through 5 and into 6 with Malik, from an offensive standpoint, and De'Aaron said this after the game, that we know what we need to work on. It's not the offense. I think we kind of saw that first and foremost last night.
Yeah, I would definitely say so. We got you mentioned the patented mid-range from DeMar. There was also one right in front of our side where he's kind of on the baseline. He takes a couple pump fakes. I forget who's defending him, but is right on his body, and it does not matter. He still goes up bottom of the net, no problem. Um, the offense looked pretty much the same. They had two different offensive sets they were going in between. Mike Brown even said before the game, De'Aaron talked about it after, like they had no set plays necessarily, like strict, everybody do exactly this sort of plays, but more so just their freelance actions that they're going in between. And I think that DeMar was able to get a feel for that clearly pretty quickly in training camp. You need to see this kept up a little bit more for sure. Obviously, we're talking about 15 minutes, like you kind of pointed out. But it's an encouraging start for that offense for sure. You also got Domas with 11 points, De'Aaron with 11 points, 5 of 10 for De'Aaron, 5 of 7 for Domas. But I think the other big question when they added DeRozan was, okay, well, Keegan's one of the biggest X factors, and his long-term growth on this team, is he going to be able to continue to expand his horizons and spread his wings, I guess you could say, within this Kings offense? And I think we've seen it a little bit at practice too, but he was fairly aggressive in recognizing his moments and trying to do something about it. And obviously, I think all his teammates, I'm sure, are encouraging that. I'm sure the coaching staff is as well. But it's really, the whole thing has been that it's on Keegan to do it, to feel comfortable enough to, even with DeMar, Domas, and De'Aaron on the floor with him, three guys that are all-stars in the NBA, that like, no, you're a very good player. So go out and do something. And I thought that he did. He took 6 shots, same as DeMar, in his 17 minutes, knocked down 4 of them, looked okay there, didn't hit any of the threes, but I thought there was a level of aggressiveness from Keegan that is encouraging, considering that was one of the questions going into the potential fit with DeMar.
Yeah, and to your point, like he wasn't just kind of a spot up floating option, and we saw that a lot in his first year. He was kind of that guy that was really a spot up shooter and kind of a guy that was getting open off that type of action. But last night he took a couple threes, sure, but the baskets that he got were, I think, at least one or two of them. One for sure was an impressive kind of, had to work for it, self created off the dribble. I think there was a little hand in his face contest as well. That's the kind of stuff that you want to see. You want to see Keegan not shy away from those attempts, because he's gonna be a little down the pecking order this year. I think last year he was second maybe on the team in attempts per game, probably ahead of Malik a little bit. I don't have it in front of me. I probably could look it up, but the point is, De'Aaron and DeMar, they're going to be numbers 1 and 2, and I think that Keegan really is a guy from an offensive standpoint, from scoring. We know that Domantas Sabonis is going to have the ball in his hands a lot. He's going to be helping create and find guys that are open and make the right play. But Keegan needs to be somebody that can't be afraid to be, he can't wait off into the weeds here. And not to point fingers at what Harrison Barnes was doing last year, but there's a lot of times where you'd say, wow, Fox is doing what Fox does. Sabonis has 8, 9 points, but like 15 rebounds. Not really a guy that can go score and self-create. Kings can really, you have that third option right now. This is especially at the latter part of the year when Malik and Kevin were out. Now the Kings have a couple more options, but Keegan needs to be able to step up. And when there's a lull in the offense, he has that in his bag too. He can self-create. He can shoot off the mid-range. He can get into the basket and get to the free throw line. We saw it last year. And seeing that last night in a limited sample size, while sharing the floor with DeRozan, while sharing the floor with Fox, with Malik for a couple minutes, I think that's important to me as far as his development goes, because I don't think you and I have ever viewed it that way as far as having DeMar DeRozan. Is it going to stunt Keegan Murray's growth? If anything, I feel like it could probably elevate his growth, because we talked about it a lot too before, that it'd be ideal for the Kings to bring in somebody not on a max contract, but on a short-term 2-3 year deal to kind of bridge that gap for Keegan, who's going to be entering his contract season in about a year. This is exactly the type of situation we talked about. A 35-year-old DeMar DeRozan who, plays a similar, position, a similar size to Keegan Murray. I think seeing just this kind of develop and go on as the year unfolds will be pretty good for Keegan's development.
Definitely think so. Yeah, like you said, we've talked about it before. DeMar really enabled Kobe White, like had a good relationship with Dalen Terry in Chicago, and wanted those guys to be the best version of themselves, and expected the exact same for Keegan. He even said that Keegan reminds him of himself early in his NBA career, a guy that's kind of reserved, more to himself, and that he was going to try to get him out of his shell a little bit for what it's worth. Sometimes I wonder how much of it's a shell and just like that's actually Keegan
Doesn't seem
Murray, you
doesn't
know?
seem like everybody keeps saying that though. They're gonna get Keegan out of his shell. I
I'm a
think
little
don't.
tired of it sometimes,
Well, I
but
think Keegan said it. I can't remember if it might have been sitting down with Allen and Chris Watkins. I can't remember, but he just kind of was like, "I am who I am," or "This is me," or he was kind of just like, "Hey, this is it." Like, there's not really anything that's hiding there. I think
yeah.
that's just literally who Keegan Murray is. But if people want to keep trying to break him out of this hypothetical or make believe shell, I'm all for it. But if it means more teasing him stuff than that and in that kind of content, then sure. But I don't think it's going to change who he is.
Yeah, I'd imagine that is still going to be the case for a good little while here, at very least. Keon Ellis fit into that starting lineup and did solid in his role. He was the one first assigned to Steph Curry. He had 4 assists. Domas also had 4 assists. Obviously, no Kevin Herter in this game. If we want to go down the line, no Jordan McLaughlin, no Trey Lyles, no Orlando Robinson, no Devin Carter. I'm pretty sure I got the whole list there. And that made for a pretty rough bench from the Kings, I guess we'll call it.
It's
There
bad.
was maybe before we move to that real quick. So defense was a big, I think, issue in this game. I guess if you want to say that for the Kings, preseason win-loss results really do not matter in the slightest. I think it's about the process. But they gave up 28 threes to the Warriors on 52 attempts. That's 53.8%. The NBA record for made threes in a game is 29 by Milwaukee, just for a point of reference.
That
And
would have
even
been a
if you just
franchise
go
record. Not sorry. That would
for
have
the
been a
Golden
franchise.
State Warriors, by the way.
That would have been a franchise record for the Golden State Warriors. By the way, again, this doesn't matter. But just to add on to that point.
Yeah, franchise record in made threes for the Warriors is kind of crazy. And it was a little bit of everybody doing it, right? Kuminga 4 of 7, Draymond 2 of 3. By the way, after he hit his second in a row, he did some sort of like I'm sure he's just talking crap out
Well,
there. You could tell that he
mid-season
was feeling
form,
good
mid-season
for
form for
sure,
Draymond. By the way,
for
he was
sure. Chew it out,
definitely
Rev.
definitely chirping. But of course, that's the Draymond Sabonis matchup's always going to bring that out of him. I think.
Yeah, but even if you just want to look at those starters, the first half, right? 68-66 at halftime. Kings a 2-point lead, but Warriors 15 of 27 from three. Kings 4 of 13 from three. So to me, it's not even just the perimeter defense, the 3-point defense specifically from the Kings, which has to do with the drives that they allow. They're trying to limit that a little bit more so this year. I believe they were around 8th in drives allowed last season. Some of the closeouts, I think, could be cleaned up. We heard about that nonstop throughout the course of last year. But I think another question that sort of arose throughout it for me is like, are the Kings going to take less threes in general this year? With having DeMar on this team, I think is obviously the most telling aspect of that. But they shot 39.3 throughout last season. They had 13 at halftime when the starters were playing. You'd be on pace for 26. Like I said, last year, you were averaging 39 a game. The Kings still managed to score, but I'm interested to see how that shot selection could alter and change a little bit this year.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely. I'm intrigued to see really what the second unit will look like. I mean, because that's going to really tell us a lot about what the identity of this team is really going to be. Like last night, that's why I'm not putting too much weight into, and I don't think anybody really is or should be. For the record, it's preseason. 28 threes is bad. Getting cooked by Buddy Hield is bad. Totally get that. I'm looking at the NBA like headline here, and it just says Buddy Hield. I can't remember what it says. Hield scorches Kings. Great headline for the preseason.
22 points on 6 of 7 from three.
He was cooking. There's no denying that. He
He
literally
was.
was just getting whatever he wanted, and I'm sure he was loving it, even though it's a preseason game. But the identity of this team really isn't fully formed yet because the bench is going to look a lot different come maybe even, I don't know about Sunday, but it seems like Jordan McLaughlin's pretty close to coming back, at least by maybe mid next week, they should have Jordan McLaughlin back. Kevin Huerter should be reevaluated at that time too. He should be back maybe even by the season opener. But the 3-point aspect is going to be interesting because you're going to have a second unit that's likely going to have one of Kevin Huerter or Keon Ellis. I think it's probably going to be Kevin Huerter, but we'll see how that unfolds. You're going to have Jordan McLaughlin, who just had a career year shooting the 3-ball at a low volume, but still someone who can shoot the 3. Malik Monk, who we've seen can, definitely get after it if he's, feeling it. He can affect the game by going into the paint and getting to the line, and that's where I think he's most effective. But he can get pretty, happy from the 3-point line. And then you have Trey Lyles, who can be a 3-point player as well. So you're going to have guys that can shoot the 3-ball in the second unit, which we maybe even see more of in those stretches where DeMar is getting a breather, where you have Malik or Kevin in along with De'Aaron or Domas, because we know how Domas like to set up shooters. And, that's what this team's been so successful on the past couple of years. They've been among league leaders in 3-point shooting. But I do think in sets with DeMar DeRozan on the floor, I don't think it'll be drastic, but yeah, I think there might be a slight dip in 3-point, shooting. And that's fine. I mean, that's fine if the Kings are able to create, in the paint. And I think the Kings last year were a pretty successful team in the paint. And that's obviously where Domantas Sabonis does most of his damage. Did knock down a mid-range last night, which was in transition too. So that was kind of interesting to see. A little pull-up 15, 14-footer. Can we see more of those? We'll see. But
no threes. No threes.
No threes. Even though he's shooting 37% the past 2 years combined, which it's 1.1 attempts per game. Take that how you will. But it is interesting to see Mike Brown say he wants players like Domas to take more threes. And I do wonder if that's because maybe he feels the same way, that there's going to be less 3-point shooting with De'Aaron probably getting to the line, hopefully a little bit more, because it'll having DeMar maybe will take a little less pressure off of him to settle for threes, which happened a lot last year. And I think that kind of frustrated some fans that De'Aaron wasn't showing that similar aggression to get into the paint, even though he takes an absolute beating when he does that. So it's probably more just about sustaining his health. But I don't think it's necessarily something I'm concerned about. Is that something that you're concerned about? Do you think the Kings are that reliant on 3-point shooting for their success? Or do you think that this could be kind of a new, chapter for this offense?
I think it could be something we're seeing a little bit differently in just how much they do it. Like I think that I kind of think both are true of what you're saying, because I do think the shooting is still important to their success for space on the floor for the guys you just mentioned, the big three, really. But that doesn't mean that there needs to be the same volume that there was last year necessarily. And, obligatory, this is one preseason game. That's this whole podcast. You could say that, maybe we should have said at the top, this is all one preseason game. So, not saying that this is going to apply to the entire season, but just notes from what we've seen from the first action. I do think that it's going to be important, and it'll look better, like you mentioned, when certain guys are out there. Just an idea sort of for timelines. The reevaluation date for McLaughlin is supposed to be tomorrow, Friday. And these are all approximate reevaluation dates. I think you saw him warming up before the game, right? Were you out there for that?
He was warming up, and we've seen NBA players warm up a lot where it's like, wow, he's really moving with a purpose out there. And that's all calculated and all planned and whatnot. But I'm intrigued to see. I mean, there's gonna be practice later today. Maybe he's out there at practice. Maybe we see him out there, but it does seem like he's close. And then a quick thing I wanted to add just before we go back. The last 2 years, the Kings were ranked in 2022-23. They were ranked 6th in 3-point attempts per game at 38.5. Last year, they were 3rd in the NBA at 39.3. So we'll see where they finish this year. I'd imagine it probably won't be in that same area where they're coming up on 40 per game, but that doesn't mean they're not going to be successful on offense.
Absolutely. I think offense is like the least of the worries for this Kings team, really. One other thing I kind of noted, like I'm watching for rotations a little bit throughout preseason. How do you change sort of last year? It was, we're always going to have pretty much always going to have one of De'Aaron Fox or Domantas Sabonis on the floor. Does that remain the case this year? Is that necessary anymore when now you have DeMar DeRozan? I've kind of taken the thought of between that big three, Keegan Murray and Malik Monk, just always have two of them out there. But yesterday we saw first sub had Mike Brown taking De'Aaron and DeMar out at the same time. He actually, again, injuries matter here, but put in Mason Jones, which I would imagine normally is Jordan McLaughlin, Malik Monk, Jalen McDaniels, who I think when Kevin Huerter's there, that could be Kevin Huerter, Keegan Murray, and then Domantas Sabonis. But an interesting note on how he could just decide to potentially stagger these guys. And, that's sort of leads us into this second unit that was very hindered because of the injuries that we just mentioned. But I'll throw it to you pretty vaguely at first. Who from the second unit stood out to you, good or bad, that you kind of want to start this conversation with?
I mean, it was the most minutes I think I've ever seen him play, but Alex Len had can I say a great preseason game. If we're, again, full disclaimer about this whole episode, it's preseason. These games mean nothing, but Alex Len in 21 minutes, 10 points, 5 of 7 shooting, 9 rebounds, 5 assists. We're talking about like a baby Sabonis type of night here over 21 minutes. Like he was, finding teammates. And I think that's a big reason why the Kings keep bringing Alex Len back again and again and again. He is a pretty nice stopgap for those minutes where Sabonis is getting a breather. Not a guy who, if Sabonis went down for any period of time, I think that they would feel great about plugging in as a starting 25, 30-minute a night center. But someone who you've seen last night that in stretches can rebound. He can find an open teammate, and he shoots usually at a high percentage around the rim. So that's really what you want. But I think Alex Len was the guy that I was like saying, okay, this is clearly the only, I mean, dare I say, maybe not only outside of Malik Monk. I mean, Malik Monk, I feel like is kind of grouped almost in with that starting category as far as what we expect from him. But maybe one of the only effective bench players last night. I mean, I'm intrigued to hear what your thoughts are. I mean, I know there's some good stuff from Boogie Ellis too, who's trying to get to win a roster spot right now. But there really wasn't very much good, to put it nicely or lightly, for the bench. It was actually just, I think Mike even kind of joked about it. Not joked, but just kind of was like, yeah, like gonna need some work. But it was, it felt like watching Summer League, I think, in the second half last night. We were talking about little Summer League-esque.
It definitely did feel like that. I would say Malik Monk played well off the bench in his less than 10 minutes, if he even counts as a bench guy. Then, yeah, really, Alex Len played great. Like you said, I think we know what he is, and he's fairly consistent in his play. Isaac Jones and Boogie Ellis, I would say, are the two that probably stood out to me a little bit. Isaac Jones seems to be somebody that they being the Kings, and what he could potentially provide. Mike Brown has talked fairly fondly of him throughout training camp. When I first asked him about him post game, for what it's worth, he played almost 20 minutes and only had 1 rebound. And that was the first thing that Mike Brown decided to point out. But, it doesn't mean that much. Like, Mike Brown is a guy that always wants his guys to be better, for what it's worth. It's very on brand. But I thought he played with good energy. He's got good size for sure. And the same thing could be said for Boogie, minus the size, I guess, but played with good energy. That he's a bucket, and he went out there and got it up a little bit, 4 of 10 from the field, but the unit that he was in absolutely needed it. It looked like a total mess sometimes out there. It was a long second half of the third quarter and fourth quarter yesterday at the game from my perspective. But I think those guys stood out a little bit. Yeah, it was an experience for sure. Summer league basketball is definitely the right point of reference. The other one I'll say is Jalen McDaniels. He is somebody I'm kind of keeping tabs on. I think we talked about it when we had Hunter on a little while ago. He mentioned him as somebody that he thinks could outperform expectations, keep in mind that the expectations are very low, which assumingly why he said that.
We were very negative about him. I think he was kind of just like, hey, like kind of like lightly raising his hand. Like,
I think
that he could be something. And it's like, right. Okay, well, I think from a positional and from a body type standpoint, he does fit what the Kings need. It's just, can he be productive? 6 points, 2 of 8 shooting, 21 minutes. He did pull down 4 rebounds, swiped a steal, 0 of 4 from 3. I mean, another disclaimer, it's a preseason game, but it does seem like someone that first and foremost needs some work. But I think you keep kind of mentioning he's the next Mike Brown project. He's the next Mo Harkless. He's the next Casey Okpala.
Yeah. those are the names that keep coming into my mind. Could he be Kessler Edwards? Could it be Juan Toscano Anderson? Like, you can go down the line, really, of it's the same thing we've talked about the Kings for years. They need more of these wing guys, wing forwards, and that's still the case. And it stood out to me that I felt like he played with the starters a decent amount. And, maybe like I mentioned earlier, Kevin would fill those minutes if he was healthy. If we want to talk way long term, maybe Devin eventually fills those minutes, Devin Carter. But, not a great first showing, but still plenty of time to prove more. When it comes down to it, like, the length and size that he has is intriguing, and he's just got to be able to hit threes, I think, is really what it comes down to. 4 from three is not going to be quite good enough, but
or don't take as many. I mean, or just don't take as many.
But I think now's the time to do it, to be fair.
It's true.
Now is probably the time to try.
Yeah, I mean, is there potential, I guess, is the question that you or many people are. Is there potential? Yeah, I think there's potential. I mean, I think that he's clearly going to be on the opening night roster. He's on the roster, he's on the team. But I think it just depends on more who's available from the players that we've been mentioning. Is Trey Lyles back from his groin issue, which seems like he's a little behind even Kevin, and for sure Jordan on his recovery process. I think his was a 3-week recovery timeline.
Yeah, so the 18th, 7 days from today would be his approximate reevaluation date for Trey.
So that'd be a little bit of a squeeze to get him ready for the 24th. But you never know. But at the same time, I don't know who the Kings are going to use to plug that hole as far as the versatile 6'9", 6'11-ish wingspan wing. I mean, they brought in Terry Taylor, who didn't show very much last night. Played 9 minutes, didn't score a basket, had 2 assists, a steal. He's 6'5", an undersized forward, but a 6'11 wingspan. Someone that I think Mike has brought up a couple times as far as someone who is standing out in camp. So I don't know if he's the one that has a leg up for that final roster spot. I mean, I think that we'll see this kind of competition between Broderick Thomas, Terry Taylor, and Boogie Ellis play out over the next, the rest of preseason, really, or as preseason goes on. We'll see roster cuts and so forth. But Jalen McDaniels is somebody that we could maybe see in that opening night rotation if Trey Lyles isn't ready. If Trey Lyles isn't ready, I think he kind of has to be. I mean, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but at this point, the Kings roster it is what it is. We've seen TJ Warren, who came in for a workout. He signed somewhere else. Nothing came of the Jay Crowder workout. I mean, am I missing anybody? I mean, Isaiah Thomas doesn't fit the mold as the forward we talked about, but the players the Kings had in,
I guess, yeah.
The players the Kings had in for workouts, they've signed somewhere else or they're not in training camp here, and we're now 1 preseason game down. So anything can change. We saw how the Cat deal worked out, but it seems pretty safe to say that Jalen McDaniels might be a guy for them if they don't make any other moves.
Especially with the injuries, it wouldn't surprise me if he got some opportunity early in the year for sure. They also play Minnesota a decent amount of times beginning of the year. I don't know if it matters, but get to play against his brother a little bit, probably fairly familiar. Dark horse to be in the rotation pretty early on, given all the injuries we're talking about. I feel like Isaac Jones could sneakily maybe get a little bit of a chance fairly early on, just because the lack of depth at that sort of 4 spot. I also think, you're probably seeing DeMar DeRozan play that 4 a little bit throughout the course of the year. But yeah, it's definitely something to monitor. I think that the defense, it's hard to just not focus on that 3-point defense. They also went to a zone for a little while at some point to try to help. And, again, first preseason game, but seeing you oh gosh, we got to try zone. Nothing's working in the first game. Not the most encouraging thing. But for the most part, I think it's fine. It's that first game. The other thing I'd point out is offensive rebounding. We've heard so much about that throughout the training camp. And the Kings end up with 8 offensive rebounds, which actually Mike Brown after the game seemed fairly okay with, because they shot 51% from the field, they being the Kings. So his argument is, there wasn't a stellar amount of offensive rebounds to be secured while the guys were out there. And we saw Alex Len have 2 of them, and then a couple of different guys all had 1 to total out to that 8. But I expected to feel that a little bit more with how much it's been talked about, but I think there could also be an aspect of we're asking about it a lot since it started to get talked about. So just something to monitor a little bit. I was watching for the offensive rebounds and didn't pop off the screen or anything.
Well, to be fair, I mean, they're the ones that are putting it on as in the media, fans, etc. They're putting it on our radars by saying that they're putting a high emphasis on it. Mike's even given the whole backstory of how Monty has been pushing for this for a long time, and Mike's worried about transition defense. And I do worry about that in the long term because the Kings, who took 2 years really, or almost the entirety of 2 seasons to finally show progress on the defensive end. I don't know if you want to have guys crashing every single possession and you're losing on these offensive or on these defensive transition situations. So we'll see if that's something that they go by for the entire year, or at least for the beginning, and if they make a change. But it was a preseason game and your starters played half the game, and I think they had 2 offensive boards at halftime, which probably happened. I would imagine Domantas Sabonis probably got those as well. No, he didn't. Point is, more times than not, it will be Sabonis who's getting those offensive boards around the glass. So I'm intrigued to see how that unfolds, and if they do try to ramp that up on Friday and Sunday. Friday in Golden State, Sunday they're back home against Portland. So I do want to see how it works out the transition defense, though, because the Kings have shot themselves in the foot time and time again on defense, and changing up the way that you attack the offensive glass could mean a lot more leak outs and transition scoring for opponents. So we'll see.
13 fast break points for the Warriors, 7 for the Kings. Definitely something to keep tabs on. I also thought points in the paint stood out, 52 for the Kings, 22 for the Warriors. I think that's the other side of if they were to shoot less threes this season, obviously you would get that back somewhere else. And did really well in the paint in that game. As we go into preseason game 2 against the Warriors that comes up on Friday, what are you sort of watching for to be different or to see if will remain the same after game 1?
Obviously, you want to look at the starters. Do they lengthen the leash out a little bit? Do you get maybe 20 minutes from your starters? They got around 15. I think maybe Fox played 19 last night. Continuing to see how that chemistry is developing with how, like we talked about, does Keegan continue to take initiative and try to get his licks in here and there? Can De'Aaron, is he going to start taking 3-pointers at a high volume again like he did last year, or is he going to continue to attack the paint like he did prior? And of course, the bench, the second unit, first and foremost, is Jordan McLaughlin going to be playing? I mean, we should, again, have clarity on that today or tomorrow. It wouldn't surprise me if they push him to Sunday just to make sure he's fully good with that ankle. But just getting more from those guys on the bench and continuing to monitor that competition for the 15th roster spot, it's hard to know what direction they're going to go because they're kind of thin across the board right now. And you look at the backup guard spot, until Jordan's back and fully healthy, they don't necessarily have a backup point guard right now. The forward situation is thin with Trey. Even with Trey Lyles back, they don't have many reliable forward options. So maybe that gives Terry Taylor a leg up. But just kind of seeing how things continue to unfold and, seeing how this group gels, because while it was only a limited sample size, it kind of makes you want to see more and to see how that works, because obviously DeRozan going 6 for 6 and scoring 15 points in 15 minutes, that's going to make anybody feel confident this is going to work. This looks great. But granted, it's against the same exact team, but you want to continue to see how these players develop to different situations and different matchups. And I'm just excited to kind of continue to see us get closer and closer to game 1. What about yourself?
Yeah, I'm the same. And for what it's worth, DeMar did it with, I'm pretty sure, Draymond Green guarding him for a little bit of that. So, which I think is actually a good matchup for Draymond, the right type of guy for him to be guarding. And DeMar was able to do that. So I'm definitely with you. You want to see kind of how it all gels. I think the defense definitely needs to be better and could lead to them getting out in transition a little bit more. I think that could have been more fun to see. Just DeMar played with pace really well. I thought there was one possession specifically that stood out to me where everybody's running down the floor and he got down quicker than some of his teammates. So moved the floor pretty well. I think it's definitely the starters that you want to see continue to gel. Can they get sort of the defense right and set the tone from there? One of the other staples they have is being physical without fouling. I think that we saw the physicality. The fouling was maybe a little bit different. They had 17 fouls, only 6 of 13 from the free throw line for the Warriors. So really not bad to give up 13 free throws. The Kings had 15 of their own, but definitely stood out a little bit that of the 17, only 2 guys had multiple, and that's Alex Len with 3, and Mason Jones had 6 fouls. Kind of impressive in the 17 minutes, but preseason game.
He was
I'm not all too
hacking,
worried about it. Yep.
hacking like summer league, man. What do you get? 10 in summer league, I think.
Yeah, I even turned over to you at a point, and I'm like, it's 6, right? It's not 10 that we're dealing with because
Does he know that? I'm not
yeah,
sure if he knows that.
yeah, that was pretty much where we're at. But I think that's really most of it. There wasn't anything that stood out extensively in post game outside of some of the things that we mentioned. Mike Brown really harped on that 3-point defense, and a lot of that is containing the perimeter, communication, physicality, really that the Kings need to be better at. And for the most part, yeah, offense looked smooth, seamless. The starters gave you everything that I think you would have wanted on that end. It's just kind of about cleaning up the defense and a little on brand for what we may have expected from the Sacramento Kings team. But again, one preseason game, got another one coming up on Friday at Chase Center. We'll see how that's any different. I hope that Jordan McLaughlin gets to play. It would be great to be able to see how he could work his way back into this offense. And yeah, I think that's it for the most part, right, Frankie? You got anything else on your mind, really?
No, not really. I mean, again, these are preseason thoughts, training camp thoughts, but I guess just kind of close out. I mean, not just the one preseason game, but in general, I feel like the Kings have 6 to 7 just really like I don't want to say great, but very good offensive weapons. When you talk about that 5 of Fox, Monk, DeRozan, Murray, Sabonis, you have Kevin Herter and Trey Lyles in their back. I mean, they really have a lot of weapons on the offensive end. De'Aaron Fox last night at the end of the game did say, we know offense is going to be fine. It's defense that they want to make sure they're good on that end of the floor. So I'm feeling good about the Kings offense 100%. I think that they're going to be as good or better than last year they were on offense. But just kind of continuing to see how these guys develop, man. I mean, it's nice that we have 3 games out of the gate, just kind of, rapid fire today or last night, Friday, Sunday. So looking forward to continuing to see the Kings grow. And after Sunday, the next time the Kings play at home is the season opener. So it's coming, man. It's really, I can't believe it's here. 2 weeks from today, actually. Happy 2 weeks until things actually matter. But for now, the only thing that matters is just that we're back watching basketball, and it's been great.
After how long we've waited, 2 weeks actually still kind of sounds like a long time.
Dude,
But
it's gonna go by
we got
quick.
preseason ahead of us. Oh yeah, I'm sure. MLB playoffs keep you happy. Let's go Royals.
Woo!
Let's go Royals
No,
tonight. Just saying. Um,
no.
you and
Thanks for not wearing the Red Sox hat today, at
no
least.
problem, no problem. I wore it the
How
other day
many
to practice, and you and Gaten were not happy. I
how
have a
many
lot of
hats do you
baseball team.
have?
I have a lot.
I know. Well, there's one person who commented, which makes absolutely no sense. What are you wearing an A's hat for on a Kings
Like of
podcast?
all the ones, like I would get questioning like a Braves hat I have or something, or
I got to
like
make sure I
an
don't wear.
Oilers hat.
If I wore a Yankees hat the entire podcast, I'm sure there'd be a bunch of comments like, "What the hell is this guy doing?" Let Brenden wear his hats. All right.
For sure. I had decided at one point last year I was like, I don't really care about baseball. Like this is the sport I'm going to commit to, just wearing whatever hat I want. And then literally right after I did that and bought a couple hats, I started to care about baseball again for what it's worth. So
wait till the Giants are like back in the playoffs. How I was last night at the
next year,
game, dude. It's playoff baseball is different. I swear on my life. Anyone that is a baseball fan can attest to baseball in the playoffs is just so different than watching regular season. It just is. And especially when you have all your coworkers or friends chirping in your ear like last night. It's Matt George. I wanted to kill Matt George last night, dude. That guy was in my ear. I love you, Matt. But I'm happy I get to watch the game tonight at the privacy of my own home without my fellow media members chirping at me the whole time, talking trash. So
yeah, best of luck. Best of luck, sir.
well, thanks.
More than
You don't mean it.
anything,
But
I
thanks.
give you a hard time about the Royals. I don't really care. All I really care about right now is that the Padres win. I just want the Dodgers taken out more than anything. It coming from the Padres would be great. I think the Padres are pretty fun for what it's worth. Definitely some swag on their team. I love Tatis's little hesitation at third. No, it's been a thing for a while. I'm a big fan. The chirping back and forth, I'm all about it. That series has been a bunch of fun. And it's fun that the Kings are starting their preseason off. And I would say started off in a good way for really the most part. Again, wins and losses are not really what it's important, but I think 6 of 6, 15-point performance from DeMar DeRozan in the first time wearing royal purple is a pretty good way to kick things off, and we'll see how they are able to carry that over. You can see plenty of content about the Kings on our site, SactownSports.com, also at the Sactown Sports YouTube to stay up to date with any press conferences, practice availabilities, and things like that, and some articles from us as well. So that's going to do it for this episode of the Return of the Roar podcast. I appreciate everybody listening. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review to stay up to date with the latest episodes. Always happy to take comments on the YouTube side for topics in the future. And thanks again to everybody. You'll hear from us again in next week or so.